one key decision when you use AJAX is how the server will communicate the responses back to, well, not yet, back to the browser. And you don't want it, you know, if you have your response just be HTML, then suddenly your poor JavaScript has to scrape its own server, you know, to get its responses. You don't want to make it hard. You could do what I did, which was to send back individual lines of text, and then you know, parse through that. That's not so bad, unless you've got really, you know, more complicated responses, and the new lines actually mean something in the data, in terms of the data. So what's usually done, you know, HTML is for if you're trying to give data back to a human. You do something else if you're trying to give data back to a program. Fundamentally, all an AJAX call is a method call over the web. And so you want the response to come back in some usable form. Originally, the idea was that when AJAX was first used, the X in AJAX stands for XML. So asynchronous JavaScript and XML. So that the response would be packaged up in XML, and then you'd have some XML reader to parse it on the browser side, extract the information and use it. But where it's evolved is the most common thing that's used in AJAX is notation called JSON. That stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And what it amounts to is what the server sends back is a string, which is the printed form. You know, imagine you create a JavaScript object and then you convert it to a string form. You printed it out. What's sent back typically from the server in JSON is the string form of a JavaScript object. And then there's a single method call, a single function called in JavaScript that'll take the string form and turn it back into an object. The method's called eval. So if you give just some arbitrary string that that is an object and call eval, it gets reconstituted as a JavaScript object. And then that's really convenient to use in a JavaScript program. So that's what we'll be doing. I'm going to change this program we've been looking at so that it sends back the string form of the JavaScript object that can just be eval and used in JavaScript. So that's JSON. So let's see how that works. Before we see how that works, let's just look at a couple of examples of how this JavaScript object stuff works, how the notation works. So I have a method I've written in JavaScript called makePerson. And so what you're seeing there, I think you can ignore the parentheses, but the thing in braces is the string form of the JavaScript object. That's a JavaScript object with two fields, name and phone, and two values, Joe, and that number right there. So if we were to take that thing that's shown right there and eval it, we would get the JavaScript object that has those fields and those values. Similarly, an array, that's the form of a JavaScript array. And so it's an array that contains 7, hello, nothing, a blank basically, and then an object. So that's the printed form of a JavaScript array. And this is going to do the same thing, but in the actual code behind the scene that we're not looking at, does that in a different way. So makePerson, makeArray, and makeArrayAll. This closure demo is not pertinent anymore because we're using jQuery. Something I don't have to explain to you anymore. So let's just quickly look at how scripting.html works, just to show you. Stop talking about it here. Just gives you an idea of how these objects work. So let's go down. Let's see where it is. I pass it by. Oh, it's examples.js. There's makePerson. So to create an object in JavaScript, you say p equals new object, and you say p.name equals Joe, p.phone equals that. You don't have to declare anything, and you can take any object and add a new field to it that way. So dirt simple. We don't have to do that in JSON. The actual object's created in the server. But all we have to do on the browser side is just take the objects apart by doing p.name, p.phone, and so forth. To make an array, it's a lot like PHP. You just say A is a new array, and you start saying A0 is 7, A1 is hello, A3 is makePerson, and A2 is missing or blank or null or something. have these convenient JavaScript objects and arrays that can be manipulated. We just need to create them. So all I did to do this, we're going to do it in 2 steps. This one here, dog breed sent from servlet as JavaScript expression formatted by JSP. Let me show you what the output looks like. I click there. That's what the server sends back. So what the server sends back is a JavaScript object, the string form of JavaScript object that has the 3 fields. One of the fields is an array. So my servlet is creating the string and spitting it out. And it's creating the string using JSPs. And then what do you suppose happens on the server side? On the browser side? How would the code, notice right here, breeds HTML is what we looked at. Breeds JS is, I have 3 servlets, right? I have a servlet that sends back lines of text. I have a servlet that's in my second servlet that sends back what I just showed you. It takes the prefix, it sends back the JSON object. What do you suppose my code that refreshes the display looks like now? The old one, split the line and the string into lines of text. It went through it that way. Okay. Right, it's going to decompose the object and paste it in the right spots. So if we scroll down to that method, this is pretty much the same. Let's find the call. Okay. Now I'm not calling showBreeds, I'm calling showBreeds.js, which is the one I just invoked directly for you. Back comes a JSON object we call show10choices. Show10choices, all it does is it takes that response, that text that came back, wraps it in parentheses, which is good practice to prevent precedence problems. He calls eval, and now we have a result object. And now we can say result.breeds. We can say breeds, breeds equals result.breeds. We can talk about breeds survive. We can talk about
where's your eval function?
Somewhere down here, result.capture, right up here. First thing I do, it's built into JavaScript.
Oh.
Yeah, it's not. I don't have to define it. So that's the advantage of JSON. I don't need a package to parse XML. Eval is already built in. So eval just does the thing, and now we have an object, and now we can deal with it as an object instead of a bunch of strings of text. So that's all there is to JSON. Well, that's from the browser side. Okay, so if we go back, if we go look at showBreeds.js, this one here, breeds.js. Okay, remember, breeds just extended a class that did all the heavy lifting. And so this extends the same class, breeds base. So all it's doing is it sets the breeds attribute, the captions attribute, the picture attribute. It says I'm giving back plain text, and it invokes a JSP, result.jsp, which composes, and will be here under WebInf, under views, result.jsp. So there's a JSP. So it just formats, it knows the syntax of JavaScript objects, and it just spits it out. Brace, picture, colon, dollar picture, caption, colon, dollar caption. And then the for each that spits out everything in the array. So it's just, you have to know to do this. You have to know the syntax of JavaScript, printed JavaScript objects, but it generates it. Yeah?
Is there a way to use the jQuery, like a JSON, like it builds JSON objects for you?
Okay. So he's observed that it's a pain in the butt to have to know the syntax of JavaScript, printed JavaScript objects, and to do this stuff. So what there is for every language that you might care to do web development in on the server side, there is a JSON package that gives method calls to build the objects for you. So you have to know the API, but you might know the syntax. So that's my next example.
Oh.
So rather than doing this, you just make a few calls to, a few JSON calls to build the object on the server side, and that gets sent. Yeah. let me show you how that works. So back to this example. So this was sort of generating the string form of JavaScript object by hand, if you will, in the JSP, laboriously. Here we have this. Now I'm going to invoke a different servlet which builds the object using the JSON library instead of doing it by hand by JSP. And you'll see you get back basically the same thing. It's not putting in new lines, and the blanks are missing. But you get exactly the same structure of object. But I was able to do that from the Java side without having to know anything about the syntax of JSP object. Okay? Let's look how it's consumed next. Do you expect to see anything different about the way it's consumed? It shouldn't make any difference, but there's actually one difference that I'm taking advantage of to simplify life even more. So I need to look at breeds JSON.html. And so we come down here where it makes the AJAX call. It's calling show breeds JSON, prefix text, show 10 choices. What do you notice about show 10 choices?
Result is already in.
Right, there's no eval necessary. And the reason is that when I show you the code on the browser, on the server side, you'll see that rather than setting the content type to text, I set the content type to applet to JSON. And so JavaScript, when it, it's not JavaScript, it's this get method up here, the jQuery. When jQuery sees it, it's gotten back the JSON object. It can tell that from the content type. It automatically calls eval on it for you, so you don't have to do that. You just, it comes in, rather than coming in as a string that you eval, it comes in as a JavaScript object off the bat. So that's a nice feature using this, the jQuery get here. All right, so we need to see the final server side, breeds JSON.java. So again, it extends breeds base, which does all the scraping. So that's what's involved in creating the object. So basically you say, create me a new JSON object, create me a JSON array, put a bunch of things into the array, and then put breeds, caption, and feature into the object. And then all I have to do at the bottom is set the content type, print the JSON object out, and then close. So there, I'm showing you a little bit here of the JSON API, but it provides methods for building these objects. But it's doing the same thing my JSP did for me, but I don't have to know the syntax of JavaScript objects. I have to know the API does. So pick your poison. And of course, for this to work, we have to have, right here in the web and in the library, I have to have the JSON.jar file in there. And like I said, if you were doing this in Ruby, or you're doing this in C#, whatever, there would be a JSON library you could use in that language to build your AJAX responses. Okay? So people look at AJAX and think, oh, what a neat thing, or what a confusing thing, or what a powerful thing. But really, what is it? You have to describe it to someone. What is an AJAX call? Like I already said earlier, 5 minutes ago. Yeah?
Asynchronous JavaScript?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's asynchronous and it's JavaScript, but fundamentally, it's nothing, it's something you learned in 1410. If you ignore the fact that it's asynchronous and then it's going over the web, it's a method call. You're just making a method call on the server. But making method calls on servers is a little complicated because of the extreme latency, right? There could be a second or two delay sometimes, and that's bad. And so it feels a little bit differently, but it's asynchronous. It's a callback. It's a method call. You just got to stand on your head a little bit to do it. So it's nothing new. It's just right. All right. So I want to give you a preview of where we're headed with this. So let me go back to another example. We'll look at the actual implementation next time. I'll just get you started here. I have a library application, and it's a pretty lame application in that you can't check out books. Some books are checked out, but that's, you can't check it anymore, you can't check it again. There's a database behind this. And so the idea behind this is to show you we're using JSON, or Ajax and JSON. We have a, in the browser we have an application like display book titles. And what happens is, there's a database on my database server that keeps track of all the books, and keeps track of all the patrons, and keeps track of which patrons have checked out which books. And then there's a couple servlets that manage the database. And then the JavaScript provides the interface, and it's all done by Ajax. And so if I go here and I click next, what's going to happen is, it's going to ask, it's going to make an Ajax call. It's going to ask the server to send the next 5 books from the database in alphabetical order, and it'll update that display right here. So if I click next here, I get that up there. It happened pretty fast. But that was a round trip to the server. And what's the server doing? It's making a database call, getting back the response, packaging it up in a JSON object, sending it back. JavaScript takes the object apart and fills in that table again. So, it's not doing the jarring full-page refresh. It notices when it's got to the end, and then I can back out. I can come here and type like COR, and as I do that, each one of those things causes an Ajax call that sends me the first 5 that start with, that contain COR somewhere in it. It's not starts with, but contains COR. So this is a typical way in which Ajax is used. So you've all used web pages that are really slick, you do lots of little intricate controls on it, and it doesn't involve refreshing the page each time. That's Ajax. If you want to make the user have a really positive user interface experience by Ajax enabling your web applications, where is the difficult programming going to be? Is it server-side programming? Or is it browser-side programming? It's the browser side. A clumsy Ajax application or a very slick one, they're all going to interact with the server the same way. They'll make some call to the server, get some data back. But just like the game genre in JavaScript, the difference between a game that was kind of clunky to play and looked ugly versus one that looks really slick and plays really well had to do with how careful you were or how ambitious you were with writing your CSS to make it look good and writing your JavaScript to make it run smoothly. So, when you think about Ajax programming, yeah, there's a server-side component, but there's almost nothing new to learn on the server side. Just the JSON library for communicating results. Where the action is here on the browser side, because I had to write the code that takes the response, and I have to know how to use jQuery to change my web page. And the more you know about jQuery, the better you can make this work. I'm not saying I would call this kind of a clunky application. It's not the world's prettiest thing. But to make it better, I wouldn't have to bother with the server at all. It'd all be browser-side JavaScript, CSS mix. Okay? So we will delve into this next time as a way of seeing more about Ajax, also seeing how Java deals with database